So we're back to talking about Iris fragrances, this time from Guerlain's L'Art et la Matière collection, Iris Torréfié. Hi guys, welcome back. I hope everyone is doing great. So we're back to talking about Iris fragrances. I got my bottle of Bel Homme from the house of Les Subsides, and I really need to say a big thank you to Eugene, because with this bottle came a Ziploc full of samples. He had asked what sort of fragrances I like, and Iris, of course, was one of the first things that I mentioned, and he sent a ton of samples, and I could not be more grateful because I get to talk about some really great fragrances. So I had purchased a little sample of Guerlain's Iris Torréfié, and then with the samples that Eugene sent was a decant, a spray decant of Iris Torréfié. And with the package of samples was also Iris Ganache, which is a discontinued fragrance from the L'Art et la Matière collection, and also Dior Homme's Silver Stem. I got to sample. There were just so many samples. These are only a few. I think these are 4 out of about 20 samples that he sent, so I'm really grateful. And one of them that I have to mention is Diaghilev. And being a fan of cheaper fragrances, I was really happy to get my nose on this one. And I will make a video about this after I wear it. And the decants have a pretty good amount of juice in them, so I'll be able to get some good wear out of this, and I'll be able to review them. So again, a big thanks to Eugene for being so generous and giving me all these decants. It will allow me to talk about some really great fragrances that I might not have gotten my nose on. Some of them were discontinued. One of them, Bottega Veneta Eau Parfum, a woman's perfume that was discontinued, I think like 2 years ago, is an excellent leather fragrance. I won't talk about that because I'm not sure about making videos on discontinued fragrances. You guys can let me know in the comments what you think about that. But yeah, so the samples that he sent really allowed me to get my nose on things that I've been meaning to get samples of, like Serge Lutens' Iris Silver Mist. I got a decant of that as well. That deserves a separate video. And again, the size of the decants are like this, so I'll get some good wear before I review any of these fragrances. So thank you, and let's talk about Iris Torréfié from the L'Art et la Matière line of fragrances from the house of Guerlain. So I had gotten a sample of this fragrance when I ordered the samples of Angelique Noir and the sample of Tobacco Honey that I spoke about in a different video. I did get a sample of Iris Torréfié, and again, having this decant allowed me to have more wares before speaking about this, but we'll call this an early impression as opposed to a review, only because it's not coming from a full bottle, but I have worn this quite a bit, both from my sample and then the one that Eugene sent. Now, I just want to mention, this fragrance is a 2020 release. The nose behind this is Delphine Jelk. So I believe that the sample that Eugene sent comes from the slimmer rectangular bottles, while this sample that I have comes from the more modern bottle. They moved the fragrances from those slim bottles to the black capped bottles that they are now using for the L'Art et la Matière line of fragrances. So I did test these side by side. I know there's a lot of buzz about reformulations when the bottles moved from the original rectangular ones into the ones that exist now. So I will mention that to my nose, the side-by-side comparison, to me, the fragrances smell the same. I did not detect any difference between the Iris Torréfié in the decant that I got from Eugene in comparison to my sample. So for this video, I'll use this bottle since it's a spray bottle and it's just easier to get on skin. So I have a dry down on my right wrist of about an hour, and I wore this yesterday as well. So let's spray. These little bottles have some nice spray action, I will say. So this fragrance opens up very musky. It's clear right from the get-go. It's a beautiful iris and it's very musky. There's ambrette in here, which is also known as muskmallow. And when I first tested this from the sample that I have, this one, before reading anything about it, before paying attention to anyone reviewing the fragrance, I immediately thought of Dior Homme Parfum. It's been said before by other reviewers. I've read it since then. But when I got this on skin, when I initially opened up my sample, I thought, this is Dior Homme Parfum, minus some of the things that were sort of, I wasn't crazy about with the Dior Homme Parfum. This one, like the Dior Homme, opens up very musky with the ambrette and the iris. But what's different about this one is that as it dries down, it's not as ambrette heavy. I feel like in the Dior Homme Parfum, the ambrette is amped up, and that was what was bothering me about that fragrance. But this, right from the get-go, when I first put my nose on it, immediately brought me to the world of the Dior Homme Parfum. I also have the Dior Homme Intense at this point, and I've tried various iterations of the fragrance. So the ambrette and that muskiness that you get at first sniff when you first spray it, it sort of like dissipates a little bit. It's still detectable, and the iris comes through like a little waxy. It's a little earthy, but it's not a rooty iris. It doesn't come off like a rooty raw fragrance. It comes off very elevated and sophisticated and clean, and the iris gets a little waxy, and I get that lipstick sort of feel and texture to the fragrance, and it's such a waxy feel that it comes off leathery, which is, I think, what brings me to the Dior Homme Parfum scent profile. Now, I know there's a cardamom note and I know there's a coffee note in here. It's not something, neither one of them are notes that I'm picking up on or that are obvious to my nose. To me, this is predominantly about the iris with that musky ambrette and this lipsticky sort of feel to the fragrance, or maybe I should say a waxy sort of iris. It's a little earthy, but it's not rooty, and it gives off a texture that is reminiscent of an iris leather fragrance with a little bit of muskiness. But as it dries down, within, I would say, a half hour, I want to say that the ambrette is not as predominant. It really quiets down, and the fragrance gets powdery, but it takes about an hour before I would classify this as a powdery fragrance. It definitely gives off a clean, elevated vibe. The iris with the combination of the musk and this waxy, lipsticky nature to the fragrance comes off elevated. It comes off sophisticated, it comes off a little dressy, and I think the difference between this one and the Dior Homme Parfum that I was comparing in my mind when I initially smelled it is the other one is a bolder fragrance. It's more bold, it's fuller, it's more long-lasting. This one is more subdued, and I would say that there are some performance issues with this fragrance because after a few hours, it's a little hard to detect. It becomes a skin scent after a few hours. So that would be my complaint about this. I initially thought, after having smelled Dior Homme Parfum and testing it and experiencing it, I actually had a bottle that I ended up selling, and then P.S. I recently grabbed a bottle because the perfume got discontinued. So I will admit I grabbed a bottle and I have it in my collection. I guess just knowing that it was discontinued, I was a little afraid that I would change my mind because that's happened before, and I love Iris fragrances and I could always sell it. And with the new 2025 version being so different from what I heard, I haven't smelled it, I got the opportunity and grabbed the bottle, and so now it's back in my collection. So back to this one. This is more subdued, while the Dior Homme Parfum is more full-bodied. But when I first smelled this, after having experienced and not being crazy about the Dior Homme Parfum, I remember thinking this could be a great alternative, because although I get that musky ambrette when I first spray the fragrance, like the first blast, it comes at you like musky. It's so reminiscent of the Dior Homme Parfum scent profile. I did think that the ambrette quieted down, and I thought, well, there you go. What I didn't like about that fragrance, this one is going to give me. But in the end, this gets way too close to the skin, way too soon. 2 hours later, it's a little hard to detect. At least that's the way it's wearing on my skin. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the price point, which I think is $350 to $375, I'm not quite sure, it's really expensive. So at that point, I feel that there are other fragrances that I would invest my money in. I would spend my money on a different fragrance because this one is not unique and the performance is a little poor, in my opinion. It is really pretty, and I do like the lipsticky, waxy component to the fragrance. But like I said, in terms of that coffee note, I'm not getting it at all. There is a tinge of sweetness, tiny, tiny bit. It's not a sweet fragrance. It's not a fragrance that comes off dense. It's somewhere between musky and dense, but it's not a fragrance that feels as dense as the Dior Homme Parfum. It comes off lighter and a little musky, and maybe a tinge of sweetness that runs through the fragrance with that nice, sophisticated, like makeup-y lipstick vibe. So it's a nice fragrance, no doubt, but I think because of the performance, I don't think that it's worth the money. So that's my take on Iris Torréfié. I have Iris Ganache here, which is a discontinued fragrance, but I did spray it on skin a few times just to compare, and we'll have another spray now. So this one has a note of white chocolate, so there's more sweetness, and the Iris Ganache is not focusing on the iris as much as the Iris Torréfié. The Iris Torréfié, iris is the main player, even though there's cardamom and a coffee note. I'm not getting those notes in the fragrance. It's all about iris, with the ambrette, of course, and the texture to the fragrance. The Iris Ganache, it has this, it's really interesting. I like it. It has a sweetness that's a floral sweetness. Like, it's not a sugary, vanillic, sickening sweetness. It's a floral sweetness. It almost seems as though there's like an orange blossom. And here there isn't, but it almost seems like there's a floral that has like a sweetness with a little bit of like a soapy vibe together with the iris. So it's too bad that they discontinued this, because I like this. I really like this one. It's fluffy and round, and it's like iris that's like sitting on like this fluffy cloud. And rather than white chocolate, for some reason, I'm making an association with like a little bit of a sweet floral, like an orange blossom. So this is a pretty nice fluffy iris fragrance. I'm not sure if maybe on a resale site like eBay, somebody is selling a bottle of Iris Ganache. I might look for that, but unfortunately it's discontinued. And Dior Homme's Silver Stem, just a quick mention. I sprayed this on skin only once yesterday, and I was really pleasantly surprised. This is discontinued. I saw this on eBay because I did check. I saw this on eBay in the realm for used bottles, in the realm of like $350 for the 100 ml, and for the, I think there's a 1.7 size as well. And those might be about $250, but the ones I saw were used, so they were not full bottles of the 50 mLs. But this is something that I would love to have as well. Really great fragrance that to me comes off like a Dior Homme Parfum without the ambrette. Like, take the ambrette out of it and it came off, I have to test it more, but from the first experience that I had with this, it came off like a nice iris that's sort of like earthy with a texture that's almost waxy, leathery, without the ambrette, that sits on the skin in like a nice scent bubble, like a nice dense way. And I get more of the iris in here than in the Dior Homme Parfum, which I think the iris is hidden by some of that ambrette, which is fine. But in this one, I feel like you get to experience the iris without the ambrette on a texture that's leather-like. It's not as strong as the Dior Homme Parfum. It seems like it's a little closer to the skin, but it's really nice. So too bad that this is discontinued. So, but at least I got to get my nose on the Dior Homme Silver Stem, and I could always explore purchasing it off of someone else if a good price comes up. So thanks, Eugene, for sending this one. I got to smell this one. And so that's it. The Bel Homme by Les Abstraits I will wear. I haven't even got a chance to get some nice wear out of this beautiful big bottle. So nice. Fantastic fragrance. I did spray it all over myself when I first got it. I wore it to bed. I'll have to get some good full wears and do a review of this fragrance, a dedicated video for this one. So that is my take on Guerlain's Iris Torréfié from their L'Art et la Matière collection of fragrances. Let me know if you guys have tried this in the comments, what you think. And if you've tried the discontinued Iris Ganache, let me know what you think of that one or any of the ones that we spoke about here today. And as usual, thank you for watching, your support, and your comments. Until next time, bye guys.